So when it comes to a competition run-up, we know how to set up our 4-step check marker, which is going to be roughly 10 feet wide and 15 feet back. But when we want to add more speed, we're going to go back another 10 feet, but we're also going to go wider by 1 foot, because this is going to allow us a slightly wider curve to handle that extra speed we have coming into the takeoff. So from here, we're going to make our fine adjustments, and we're going to do that by seeing what happens over the bar. Now, the easiest one to fix is when we see the athlete coming down on the bar. This just means that they're too far away at takeoff. So we can move both check markers in and put them into the right position at the takeoff. Now, the more difficult scenario is when we see our athletes start to slow down into the takeoff. Now, this could be because our curve is too tight and they're not able to run with freedom around the curve, in which case we need to take the curve slightly wider. It might be that they're too close and therefore having to take smaller steps into the takeoff in order to get their run up in which case we need to take the run up back. So we're looking to see, is it a speed issue on the curve that they can't handle these forces, in which case we need to either widen the curve or spend some time creating that strength and stability on the curve, or is it that they're running well on the curve and then having to shorten the last 2 to 3 strides in order to fit their run up in which case we need to take them back on the runway. Now, one of the other scenarios we see is our athletes are crashing through the bar in the takeoff. Now, this might be because they're too close, in which case we just take the run up back. Or the other scenario is that they may be cutting their curve early, which means if they initiate their curve early, they're going to come into the bar at more like a 45-degree angle than the 30-degree angle that we're looking for. And that means when we go through our takeoff, we're going to have much more lateral movement into the bar and hit the bar. So in which case, we need to make sure they're having discipline to stay on their marker and running around the outside of that curve, not cutting in on their curve and running directly at the bar. Now, the final scenario we see quite often is our athletes moving along the bar and then taking the bar down with their feet at the end. Now, this is a fairly easy one to fix, because what they're doing is they're coming in too deep on their curve, missing their check marker, and then they're trying to do a 90-degree turn and coming directly along the bar at maybe 10 degrees. So they don't have this lateral forces from the tight curve, and they don't have the appropriate approach angle to take them over the bar. So we need to make sure that they're using their check marker effectively and that they're initiating their curve when they're supposed to be and not coming too close to the mat before trying to run along the bar. So these are some of the common issues we're going to see in the high jump, and how we make those corrections by adjusting that check marker, making the curve tighter by moving it in or wider by moving it out, and moving our athletes closer or further away from the bar by moving it closer or moving that check marker back. Once we then have that freedom, the smoothness in the run, arriving at the 30-degree position with nice positions, we can focus on that takeoff and making those fine adjustments through the takeoff and over the bar. So one of the common questions we get in the high jump is, how do I know what height to start at and which height to take? Well, as a common rule of thumb, we're looking for our best jumps to be on jumps maybe 6, 7 and 8. This gives us time to warm up our body, gives us time to find our rhythm of the jump and the timing of the jump over the bar, but we haven't had enough jumps where we start to get tired like we will be in jumps 10, 11, 12. So we're going to plan back from our target height. We're either going to be going in 3 or 5 centimeters commonly in most competitions, and we can count back to make our PB jump, our new record jump, maybe jump number 6 in our sequence. That means if we have a couple of failures, we can still have that jump 7 and 8, which is in our target range for our personal best jumps, but it also gives us enough jumps to warm up our body and find the timing before we reach those new record heights. Now, what we can do if we have a long wait before we start jumping is to take an early height, to use this as a warm-up jump to wake up our body and to find our rhythm, and then we can skip a height or two and then come back in at an appropriate height ready to go. But always we're aiming for that new record jump and our target height to be somewhere around that 6th, 7th, 8th jumps in the sequence.